what if the fact that you feel absolutely nothing after a completely chaotic day at work isn't, a sign of ultimate professionalism?
Right.
Like, what if it's actually a massive psychological warning sign? Picture this. You get to the end of a brutal Tuesday back-to-back meetings, maybe a project derailment, an argument with a colleague.
Oh, we've all been there.
Yeah, and you just collapse onto the couch, and someone asks how your day was, and your only response is this completely numb, I survived.
Well, it's a state a lot of people actually aim for, oddly enough.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, in highly complex, fast-moving environments, emotional detachment often just gets mistaken for resilience.
Mm.
People, they treat making it to the end of the day intact is the baseline metric for success.
Which is, survival is a fairly low bar for a career,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
And that numb survival mode is kind of the exact target of our deep dive today. Welcome, everyone. We are pulling apart a really fascinating piece of writing by Steve Walker. It's titled Reflective Practice in Youth Work: The Art of Understanding Self.
And just to jump in here, if you are listening to this and thinking, well, I am not a youth worker, why do I care? Stick around.
Exactly. Please stick around. Because while the context of the source material is youth work, which, is incredibly unpredictable because human development is unpredictable, the actual frameworks Steve Walker outlines for navigating that chaos, they are entirely universal.
They really are.
And that's our core mission for this deep dive. We're going to take these advanced sort of academic models for self-reflection and translate them into a superpower for you, regardless of whatever fast-paced environment you happen to operate in.
Yeah, the author uses this subtitle that I think really anchors the whole thing. It's You Are Your Own Compass.
Oh, I loved that part.
Right, because when you just aim to survive, it's like looking at a compass merely to confirm you haven't walked off a cliff.
Just checking you're still breathing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But deep structured reflective practice is like actually opening up the compass housing. Understanding the magnetic fields that are pulling at the needle and actively recalibrating your internal GPS so you can actually choose a destination.
Which sounds great, but, and I think the text does a good job of grounding this, to understand the mechanics of that recalibration, we have to look at how human beings are just biologically wired.
Yeah. The foundational premise here is that we are essentially meaning-making machines.
Right.
We're heavily reliant on storytelling and pattern recognition. I mean, from an evolutionary standpoint, the brain is an energy hog.
It wants to conserve calories.
Exactly. It wants to be lazy. So when a complex event occurs, your brain immediately categorizes it.
Right.
It slaps a familiar narrative on it and triggers a habitual reaction, just so it doesn't have to process the new data.
So we basically default to lazy stories. Like something goes wrong at work and the immediate internal narrative is just, oh, they never listened to me, or I'm just bad at pitching ideas.
Yeah, and those rapid-fire stories, they are riddled with unconscious biases.
Right.
And triggered emotional states. The brain just assumes it knows what is happening based on past patterns. So effective reflective practice actually intercepts that biological wiring.
It kind of forces the brain out of that energy conservation mode.
It does. It acts as a mirror, making you pause that automatic story and interrogate whether the pattern you are seeing is, actually reality or just your habit reacting to stress.
Okay, let's unpack this, though, because interrogating every single thought sounds exhausting.
It can be.
Right. Like when you are dealing with a constantly shifting landscape, a client changing their mind, a team member struggling, or young people in crisis, isn't there a very real danger of just overthinking?
Oh, for sure.
There's a fine line, I think, between critical inquiry and just spinning your tires, just dwelling on a past mistake until you are paralyzed by it.
Well, what's fascinating here is that the author draws a really sharp line between rumination and actual reflective practice.
Okay, how so?
So rumination, the tire spinning you just mentioned, is a closed psychological loop. It usually sounds like, I should have done X, which assumes you already possess all the facts and are merely judging yourself for the outcome.
You're just beating yourself up in a dark room.
Exactly. But true reflective practice, which the text calls evaluative conceptualization, starts from a completely different baseline.
Which is what?
The acknowledgement of ignorance.
Oh. Admitting you don't actually know why the meeting went off the rails.
Precisely. You have to start by admitting there are variables you just do not understand. Evaluative conceptualization isn't sitting alone judging yourself. It is an active, dynamic response that breaks down the mechanics of an event.
So you're shifting the cognitive load.
Right. You're moving from what happened and whose fault is it to what were the hidden mechanisms at play and how can I manipulate them next time?
I like that. That reframes reflection from a guilt trip into almost like an architectural teardown. But taking an event apart requires tools. I mean, it is one thing to know we need to escape the closed loop of rumination, but how? And this is where the author brings in some heavy hitters from educational theory to provide that structure, starting with Donald Schoen.
Right, so he provides a framework that essentially divides our awareness into two distinct phases. The first is reflection and action, and the second is reflection on action.
When I was reading this and trying to visualize those two phases, I honestly kept coming back to driving a car.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, like reflection in action is when you are driving down the highway at 60 miles an hour and a massive pothole suddenly appears.
You don't have time to stop and think.
Exactly. You don't pull over, write a pros and cons list, consult a committee. You just swerve intuitively. You're using your immediate awareness and your internalized skill to adapt to the present danger.
And that captures the real-time adaptation Schoen is talking about perfectly. It is thinking on your feet, allowing your accumulated expertise to guide a split-second decision. But, and this is key, that intuition must be evaluated later, which is where reflection on action comes in.
So that would be getting home, pulling the dash cam footage and reviewing it.
Yes.
Like asking, why was I driving on that unmaintained route in the first place? Did my swerve put me in the other lane? How do I map a better route tomorrow?
That dash cam review is where the actual growth happens. And to make that post-event review really rigorous, the author synthesizes another framework into this. David Kolb's experiential learning cycle.
Okay, let's get into Kolb.
So Schoen tells us when to reflect, but Kolb tells us how to process the data once we have pulled that dash cam footage. Kolb argues that learning from experience is a four-stage continuous loop.
Okay, let's apply Kolb's loop to something highly relatable for people listening.
Sure.
Let's say I am leading a Tuesday morning status meeting, and halfway through, my team completely checks out. People are looking at their phones, somebody asks a passive-aggressive question, and the whole pitch just falls apart. How does Kolb walk me through that?
Okay, so the first stage of Kolb's cycle is the concrete experience. This is the raw event. The meeting crashed and burned.
So I'll just sit with that.
You don't analyze it yet. You just acknowledge it happened. That's stage one. Then the second stage is reflective observation.
Okay, so gathering the data from the wreckage.
Yes, and crucially, stepping outside of yourself to do so. You observe what happened without judgment. You note that when you brought up the budget, 3 people crossed their arms.
Right.
You note that your own voice got tighter. You are just laying all the observational data out on the table.
But then what? Because just staring at data doesn't fix next week's meeting.
Which brings us to the third stage, abstract conceptualization.
That's a mouthful.
It is. But this is where you look at all that data and extract a universal rule or theory. You move from the specific event to a broader concept. You might theorize, when I present budgetary constraints without first offering context on our wider goals, the team feels threatened and disengages.
So I am essentially forming a hypothesis.
You are. And a hypothesis is totally useless unless tested.
Right.
Which leads to the fourth stage, active experimentation. In your next meeting, you consciously alter your behavior based on that hypothesis. So you provide the strategic context before introducing the budget numbers.
And the outcome of that meeting becomes the new concrete experience, starting the whole loop all over again.
Exactly. That is the core purpose of Kolb's model, continuous transformation. You do not just run the cycle once and declare yourself a master manager.
Right. It's not a checklist.
No, it's a relentless engine for finding mutually beneficial solutions through iteration.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because, wait, let's back up a second. There is a massive vulnerability hidden in all this.
Hey.
We talked about Schoen's reflection in action, the swerving around the pothole. The source material explicitly notes that this real-time swerving relies heavily on intuition and our connection to our own truths. But earlier, we established that our brains are lazy, biased pattern matchers. So if my intuition is built on a foundation of unconscious bias, isn't my swerve just going to reinforce my own flaws?
That is the exact trap of isolated reflection. If you only rely on your internal dash cam, you create an echo chamber. You might run Kolb's cycle, but you only observe the data that confirms your pre-existing beliefs. So you conclude the meeting failed because your team is lazy, not because your presentation was confusing.
Oh, wow. So how do we break that echo chamber? How do I calibrate the compass so it's pointing to true north and not just, being distracted by a magnet in my pocket?
To solve this, the text introduces Stephen Brookfield's four lenses of critical reflection.
Brookfield. Okay.
Brookfield argues that to truly understand any experience and neutralize our biases, we must look at it through four distinct and sometimes conflicting lenses.
What's the first one?
The first is the self lens, which is basically what we have been doing, examining our own narrative and feelings.
Okay, so that is the baseline. What's next?
The second is what the author terms the young people's lens, which translates to the perspective of the person you are serving, your client, your student, your team member. You have to aggressively attempt to see the interaction from their vantage point.
Which usually shatters the ego pretty quickly, honestly.
Oh, it really does. And then the third is the colleague's lens. This involves actually seeking out peer feedback. A colleague who is sitting in that failed meeting might say, you didn't notice it, but when you mentioned the budget, you glared directly at Sarah, which made everyone defensive.
So they see the blind spots your ego naturally hides.
Exactly.
And the fourth lens.
The theoretical lens. This anchors your specific problem in wider frameworks, literature, or organizational history. It forces you to ask, has anyone else ever faced this problem? And what does the established research say about solving it?
That makes a lot of sense. Using all four lenses feels like you are taking a 3D scan of a situation rather than just looking at a flat 2D photograph. But let's be honest about the human cost of this. Looking through those lenses, especially asking colleagues for honest feedback, or trying to genuinely inhabit the perspective of a client who maybe just yelled at you, can be incredibly messy.
It's very vulnerable.
Yeah. What if I use Brookfield's lenses and discover I was completely in the wrong, that my bias actively harmed a project or a person? That can trigger a massive emotional defensive reaction.
And the author anticipates that overwhelm. If we connect this to the bigger picture, when reflection unearths something highly emotionally charged, the text provides a final, heavily scaffolded structure. Graham Gibbs' reflective cycle.
Okay, Gibbs. How does his cycle differ from Kolb's?
Think of Kolb's cycle as an engine for general learning, but Gibbs' cycle is specifically designed to safely unpack complex, chaotic emotional experiences.
I picture Gibbs' cycle like a centrifuge in a laboratory.
A centrifuge. Okay, I like that.
Yeah, like you have this chaotic, messy event full of anger or shame. You put it into the centrifuge, and it spins it so fast that the objective facts and the subjective emotions actually separate out into clear, analyzable layers.
Centrifuge is an excellent way to conceptualize it. Gibbs' cycle forces that separation through 6 rigid steps.
Walk me through them.
You start with description, just the objective facts. No feelings allowed yet.
Just what happened.
Right. Then you move to feelings. What were you thinking and feeling before, during, and after?
And isolating the feelings like that is crucial because if you don't label them, they just bleed into the analysis.
Yes, exactly. So the third step is evaluation. What was good and bad about the experience? Only then, once the facts and emotions are completely separated, do you move to analysis, where you try to make sense of the situation.
Okay, and then?
This leads to a conclusion about what else could have been done and finishes with an action plan for the future.
That structure is brilliant. It prevents defensive posturing because the structure forces you to acknowledge the emotion without letting it hijack the conclusion.
Exactly.
And this mention of feelings in Gibbs' cycle illuminates what I found to be, honestly, the most surprising thread running through Steve Walker's entire piece.
What's that?
Well, we have spent the last 10 minutes talking about structural architectural models for thinking. Schoen, Kolb, Brookfield, Gibbs. But the author explicitly states that the singular connection uniting all of these models is the practitioner's feelings.
Yes. Emotion is the engine driving the entire apparatus.
It brings us all the way back to the hook of our conversation, really, the numb professional collapsing on the couch.
Right.
The author points out that an essential part of reflection isn't just managing the feelings we have, it is investigating whether we have acknowledged them at all, or, most alarmingly, if we do not have any feelings regarding a complex event.
Which is so common. We culturally conflate professionalism with stoicism.
Yeah.
The ideal worker is seen as unbothered, functioning like a machine. But the text frames a lack of feeling, not as strength, but as a glaring warning sign of psychological detachment.
Why does a blank emotional dashboard mean the system is failing, though?
Because your feelings are the readouts from your core values, your beliefs, and your sense of agency. If you lead a disastrous meeting or navigate a major conflict and you feel absolutely nothing, No frustration, no curiosity, no drive to fix it. It means you have disconnected from those core values.
Wow.
You have surrendered your agency. Without that emotional mapping, you cannot develop resilience. You cannot build emotional intelligence. You are merely surviving the climb.
Just surviving. Okay, so we have the theory. We know we need to escape the autopilot loop. We know how to use Schoen to swerve, Kolb to learn iteratively, Brookfield to see in 3D, and Gibbs to separate emotion from fact.
Right.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? How do you actually apply this toolkit tomorrow morning?
Steve Walker distills these theories into highly actionable tips for developing your own practice. And honestly, they scale perfectly to any profession.
Okay, let's unpack the actual toolkit. What's tip 1?
Tip 1, keep structured reflective journals. But this is not a diary where you just vent about your boss.
Right, it's not a burn book.
No. You use the frameworks. You literally draw out Gibbs's 6 steps or Kolb's 4 stages on a page and force your brain to pour the day's messy events into those rigid molds. It trains your mind to process chaos strategically rather than emotionally.
I love that. Tip 2 stood out to me because it involves changing how we interact with leadership. It's about shifting the nature of supervision and mentorship.
Yeah, because most supervision is purely transactional problem solving.
Right.
Fire breaks out, the boss tells you how to put it out, you move on.
Right.
The text advises shifting those interactions toward a coaching mindset. You don't just ask your mentor to solve the problem. You use them as a sounding board to explore how you process the problem, aiming for capability growth, not just damage control.
Which flows right into tip 3, which is pulling Brookfield's lenses into the real world, engaging in reflective peer dialogues.
Exactly. You consciously set up discussions with colleagues to explore multiple perspectives on challenging situations. You actively seek out people who will look through the lenses you don't naturally possess. You have to invite the friction of differing viewpoints.
And how do we build the muscle memory for Schoen's real-time adaptation? I mean, I can't just wait for a crisis to practice swerving.
That is tip 4, scenario-based learning.
Okay.
You analyze past case studies or hypothetical scenarios with your peers. You basically war game situations, discussing how you would adapt your responses in real-time contexts. You visualize the pothole so that when it actually appears on the highway, your intuitive swerve is calibrated, not panicked.
That makes total sense. And the final tip is the remedy for that blank emotional dashboard we discussed earlier, emotional mapping.
Yes. The author suggests actively tracking your emotional responses to identify actual triggers and source patterns.
Like writing them down.
Literally document it. When a colleague questions my timeline, I feel an immediate spike of defensive anger. Why? Because it triggers an underlying insecurity about your competence.
Right.
Identifying the source pattern is the required first step to emotional regulation. You cannot fix a machine if you refuse to look at the diagnostic codes.
What really strikes me about this list of tips is that the author emphasizes you do not have to declare yourself a Kolb loyalist or a Gibbs purist.
No, not at all.
Right. The true transformative power lies in the synergy. It is the combination of structured journaling, peer dialogue, coaching, and emotional mapping that gives you the enhanced self-awareness needed to intentionally navigate your environment, rather than just surviving the people around you.
The overarching demand of the source material is rigor.
Yeah.
These models require vigorous attention. Superficial reflection leads to superficial growth. It requires a tremendous amount of courage to look at your own actions this closely.
And that takes us back to the fundamental metaphor. Whether you are an educator trying to reach a difficult student, a manager trying to unify a fractured department, or just someone trying to navigate a chaotic Tuesday, you are your own compass. You are the instrument that determines direction.
But an uncalibrated compass is arguably more dangerous than having no compass at all,
Oh, that's a good point.
because it gives you the illusion of intentional direction while quietly leading you off a cliff.
So true. By using these models, by aggressively acknowledging your biases, gathering uncomfortable perspectives, and deeply interrogating your emotional dashboard, you ensure your compass is calibrated by empathy, critical thinking, and a profound understanding of self.
This raises an important question, though, for everyone listening to take away.
Yeah, consider this before you start doing the deep work. The author notes that rigorous reflection acts as a mirror to our true selves, helping us adapt and operate better within our given environments. But what happens if you apply Kolb, Gibbs, and Brookfield? What if you map your emotions, look deeply in that mirror, and realize that your newly reflected, authentic core values fundamentally clash with the environment or the system you are currently trapped in? If reflection is the mirror, are you prepared to change the landscape if you realize you can no longer survive the reflection?